Hi, everybody. It's Angela here again. For those of you who may be new to the Polymath Place YouTube channel, a little bit about me. So I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the lived experiences of modern day polymaths. And a few months back, I connected with Barry James on LinkedIn. And over the months, we've become friends. And we have realized, I think, that although I'm speaking polymathy talk and Barry's speaking economic talk, we're sort of saying the same things through different paradigms and through different lenses. So Barry, start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and particularly your interest in economics and your background in that field?
In many ways, I've never really had an interest in economics, and in some ways I still don't. My background really is mostly in tech, and also in innovation more generally. That's where I've spent most of my life and career. My interest in economics has come from asking the question, after it turns out 70 years. We've just gone past the point. It's 70 years that we've had huge warnings about ecological disaster through climate change. Why can't we stop? Asking that question, and the same for at least 30, maybe 40 years now. We've been impoverishing the vast majority of people rather than the reverse. That's all turned around again. Why can't we change that? And the answers were clearly in economics. So, this is one of the advantages of having the kind of brains that you were referring to earlier on. You kind of roll your sleeves up and you go, okay, let's be that outsider that Thomas Kuhn talked about. It's usually the outsider that can see the whole game. Let's kind of understand how that's come about, how it is that how it is that we've ended up here, but also how we're being maintained here. And very, very briefly, this has come from a set of economic doctrines. It's not science, it's doctrines that have become our operating system globally, and therefore nationally in each case. And we're kind of stuck with it. And we're currently working on how we change that. So that's how come I've become known for humane economics, which has now expanded, of course, and become Humane X with some of these other elements, including the thing we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to say one thing, and then I want to ask you another question. But for anyone listening to this or watching this, I'd just like to point out, first of all, that Barry James is just a wonderful human being. I can tell he has a good heart. He cares about other human beings. He cares about making the world a better place for everybody. And I aspire to those same ideals as well. Like, I want to use my life for good to the maximum extent that I reasonably can. And I've come at it through the lens of polymathy, like by unleashing your fullest, most versatile, most human, authentic self. You live a better life individually, but you can also help elevate the collective that way. And Barry has similar values about intentionally creating a world that's more humane for the maximum number of people possible to make the world a better place. And the thing I've realized, and I think the thing Barry and I realized when we were talking recently, is there's a lot of dehumanization on our planet. There's a lot of lack of dignity that we do to each other. We do acts, I consider an act of violence anything whatsoever, whether it's physical or not is irrelevant. You can still do violence to another person. Anytime you don't acknowledge the full sentient conscious being deserving of dignity that exists, even when that being makes mistakes, even when that being is wrong, they still have a fundamental right to dignity and humanity and being treated humanely, regardless of where they are, what their education is, how much money they have, if they've committed a crime even, they're still deserving of some basic fundamental human rights. So today, our video, this conversation is really about dignity. It's going to be about the dignity donut. So first question, Barry, is what is the dignity donut? What is it? What does it mean?
Okay, so the donut part of it, by the way, is a homage to the work of Kate Raworth in Donut Economics, which is a new way of thinking about economics that brings in the needs of the planet and the needs of humanity together. If folks haven't seen that yet, go and look up Kate Raworth and Donut Economics. It's fantastic. But that's part of the homage. But where Dignity Donor came from is informative. So having got to the point I described before, where we now understand that these forces at work that have kind of got out of control, it become the operating system for the planet, and produce the kind of conflict we were talking about earlier. They frame us all in a zero-sum game, when it's absolutely unnecessary, and in competition with each other. Nothing wrong with competition in its place, but actually this is what we've got isn't competition in its place. It's markets and money above people and planet. So I think we all kind of know that. But then you come to the problem that we have with not just politics. Politics is part of this, but more generally, the discourse that we have is not just aggressive, but it's very, very fractured, and it's philosophically fractured as well as in every other way as well. And I mean that in a practical way. So I've got a diagram that I drew of, you can imagine two sides of there's a gulf in the middle and two cliff edges, and people shouting at one another from either side, but not communicating. And that's really how it is, because we have no means of finding consensus. In a world where my truth might be completely different to your truth, how do we find a consensus? In generations gone by, we had a common framework in religion or Christianity or whatever. But we don't have that anymore. So it was Dignity Donut was created in order to answer that need, to provide a cornerstone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you're saying. Like there is this, oh gosh, we are just more divided and more divisive than ever, I feel like. I mean, I've never seen such contentious society as long as I've been alive. And even if we were to communicate, that doesn't guarantee any level of actual understanding. It's one thing to communicate, it's another to really understand someone else's experience. And I think what we really need in our world is more understanding and respect for difference and an appreciation. We talk about the importance of diversity all the time. And then in actual practice, when someone has a kind of mental diversity, for example, a different way of thinking, we commit acts of verbal violence all the time and dehumanize them and insult them for thinking differently, especially online. We love to just insult people who think differently, dehumanize them with our words when we're behind the veil of the internet. And but my personal opinion is that it's being different, having diverse beings here is actually what is our superpower. It gives us more resources and versatility and difference that we can pull from. If we're all the same, man, we are not going to make it. We must be different. We must promote being different. But that also means then that the difficulties that come along with being around people who think differently have to be managed. But a key element of managing difference is to just acknowledge that no one knows it all. No one is the best. No one is perfect. We're all just here trying to do, this human experience and make it through it the best we can. But if we can do it without damaging other beings, damaging the planet, promoting inequality and acts of violence, like obviously we should do that. We should evolve ourselves into higher, better beings that promote beauty and diversity and understanding and loving kindness. So Barry, next question. How does it work? How does this work?
Okay, so as I say, we wanted to create just the beginning, the starting point, find a starting point that we can all agree on and build on. And so it's really the confluence of three streams of research. So it's kind of built on research, partly on the insights that I've mentioned already from humane economics, the things that aren't working and why they're not working. But then we started to look at. I started to look to try and find an anchor or a cornerstone that we can all agree on. And immediately you start to look at the most recent science of humanity, that there's something really powerful there. So there's tons and tons of recent research. The idea that man is basically an animal that's predatory, is clearly just wrong. It now is increasingly emerging social creatures who are interdependent. We need one another. We work together. That's the only reason that the human race works. It's because it's a human. We create civilizations. We create tribes and societies and so on. And iconic of that work, by the way, and the easy way into understanding this is Nicholas Christakis' book from Yale. Nicholas Christakis is at Yale. He's done tons of his own research, but he's brought together a lot of the rest of the research in a book called Blueprint, which lays this all out. And key to that is he's identified what he calls the social suite. And these are, if my memory serves correctly, 22 different categories, different things that are common to all human societies. He's kind of studied across all societies. So enabling us to kind of understand how human beings work. So that was eye-opening and really helpful. I've boiled those down together with some of the work I'll come on to on dignity, from really groundbreaking work by Donna Hicks, who's Harvard-based, to three things that are basic to humanity, and they are fairness, balance, and justice. I believe these are transcendent values in that they transcend us all. If you're human, even if you're a sociopath, you believe in those things. Because even if you're a sociopath, if I say to you, can I treat you unfairly? We all know what the answer is going to be. The real answer is going to be. So this has got to be, there's got to be reciprocity there.
Don't you think that... Quick side note is, don't you think even animals and children have this built in? Like, we don't have to be taught to care about fairness, balance, and justice. It's just in us somehow.
In the higher apes, definitely. The higher apes, definitely. Yeah, sure. And again, that's covered quite a lot in Nicholas
Dignity.
Christakis' book, I should say.
Oh, and Blueprint. Okay.
Yeah, and really good on all of that. And there are animals that are not like this. There are some that lead solitary lives, lead predatory existence, but that's not us.
And also, I mean, personally, as someone who's studied at least the American courts and prisons, I can say without a doubt that fairness, balance, and justice are very broken in those arenas. And I think throughout pretty much the whole world, we're really lacking in fairness, balance, and justice. We're doing a really poor job. Would you agree with that?
And we've kind of given up on, the economic doctrines tell us to give up on fairness, balance, and justice, to be honest, certainly on fairness. But these are fundamental to humanity. And Donna Hicks independently discovered this from another point of view. So Donna is a world-renowned conflict resolution expert who's worked in Northern Ireland and in many places in Africa, worked with Desmond Tutu and others. And her, she's done a lot of research on the back of this, but the first glimmerings, the way she explains this is fantastic. You know, imagine her in a room with, you know, all the different factions around the table. You know, they've been at war for years. There's hatred. There's way beyond rivalries. And she said in those situations, she gradually realized that the things that were passing across the table were not really what were the issues. The issues were under the table, as she put it. And they were about the heart's cry for dignity, for the dignity of the people around the table, each of them, to have their worth acknowledged, their humanity acknowledged. That this is a particular meaning of the word dignity. It's got nothing to do with pomp and circumstance and coronations and stuff like that. It's actually about, you know, valuing people as human beings. And from that, she went away and has done a huge amount of research and come up with this framework, which is about the way that we can preserve our own dignity in the face of challenge, as well as understanding how to not infringe other people's dignity. And the acid test of this is this: we took this out. We took this out into schools. So one of my co-founders for Humane X is Janine Perryman. She works a lot in schools. She works a lot in conflict situations in schools, and bringing that framework to those conflict situations, which have been created by financialization, that's been created by the use of a compliance methodology to try and control the schools and control the children, that really just, you know, creates problems and challenge and animosity. You know, she was able to give words to actually, she, you know, what she felt and still feels was what she was trying to achieve in other way, you know, in other ways without the words. The understanding of, you know, if the starting point is that you're a human being, I'm a human being, the teacher is, you know, the guy from the local authority or council, you know, we're all human beings, you know, and we've got a situation. So we're dealing with the situation now, rather than, you know, just playing a role and at war. And it's proved to be incredibly powerful. And when you hear Donna talk about this, you can find some of her videos online. There's one particular one where she talks about how this works with children. That, as you said earlier on, Angela, once children get their hands on this toolkit, they use it. It feels natural to them. So they start to talk about, you know, dignity violations, you know, in the way that people are dealing with them, in the way that perhaps they've been dealing with their parents in the past, and so on.
You want to hear something really cute? Just a quick side note. I have a 6-year-old daughter. She's in 1st grade. And in her classroom, they have the peacemaking corner. They have and it's called peacemaking. Like if you have a beef with someone, you meet in the peacemaking corner and you go make peace. A couple other quick observations I want to have to everything you so beautifully said, Barry. I'm a fan of Oprah Winfrey. I watched her for years, and she talked to so many human beings from all different backgrounds for 25 years on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And she boiled it down. Like she figured out what every single guest was doing there when she would interview them. And it was consistently, do I matter? Does my experience matter? Do you see me? We all have this fundamental need for our lives to mean something to somebody. And when you get acts of your perspective doesn't matter, or verbal violence, or even physical violence, like these are all messages that say to people, you don't matter, you don't matter. And that's just incorrect, because everybody matters who is alive and who is human, just for the simple fact that they were born in human. And if we can create a world where it's less this and it's more like this, I really think humanity would be stronger, more capable. Like we could stop wasting our energy on infighting and focus on the problem. Like us, like let's focus our energies, you and me, against the problem, not you and me against each other.
Yeah.
And you said so my next question for you is, so I think a lot of people would not equate dignity with economics. Okay, but they are absolutely connected, I believe. But can you say a little bit more of why dignity matters in economics? What is the link for you? Why is it so important?
I think for me, dignity is having, you know, some things once you've seen, you can't unsee them. And dignity and the recognition of other people and their dignity is an absolute requirement on us all. There's none of us that are independent. We were all brought up by a parent or a surrogate parent, a mother, usually, often two parents, and owe a debt we can't repay. We owe a debt we can never ever repay. And actually it goes wider than that. You know, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, actually, you know, we all live in a society where we are interdependent. So you know, what we've got at the moment is a world that's tried to ignore all of that. And the more we've ignored that, the more we've ignored not just the ecological externalities, as they call them, but also the social and human externalities, the worse things have got for us. And, you know, you can look back to the 1970s and onwards when this thinking started to infect and infiltrate the mainstream. That I'm not saying things were perfect before they weren't, but as a process of the old framework, which was you know, a legacy from you know, a religious past, Christian or Muslim or whatever, that kind of gave us some rules, you know, do as you would be done by, and all that sort of thing. That all receded by, you know, supposedly replaced by this scientific mindset that's about efficiency and, you know, and so on, which was nonsense. You know, that it isn't scientific. In fact, quite the reverse. It's you know, as I said, the economic stuff is purely doctrines. It's, you know, ideas that have proved toxic. But you can see the, you know, the effects of replacing that, you know, all around us in the divisiveness we've talked about, the you know, the fact that we keep on destroying the ecosystems and the planet, and things are getting worse. So, as I say, that's where, you know, dignity comes to economics. You know, it comes to acknowledge that and provide, as I say, a basis for a place we can start to build. So what we started to do with this, and we want to extend this work, is, and this is where the work with Janine began, was to say, okay, so think about the place you work, or if you know, if you're in school, think about your school, think about all the different settings in which you live and interact with people, and ask yourself, what would that be like if, you know, if from the dignity framework, you know, how would that be different if those were the priorities? Because one of the things, just aside, one of the things that's happened over all those years, by the way, is economics was originally supposed to be about producing the most good for the most number of people. That got lost along the way. So putting that back aside, what would that look like? You know, instead of Janine walking into a situation where parents were under threat because the kids don't want to go to school. The school's under pressure from the authorities and the government to tick the boxes. They're teaching very narrowly in ways that the kids don't like. What would that look like if everyone went, okay, actually what we're trying to do here is, you know, we've given the stewardship of the education of these kids, so it's actually about the kids and the families, and wrap everything else around that rather than around budgets.
Yeah. Oh gosh, you know what comes up for me so much right here is a lot of our educational system is designed around, I believe it's Paulo Freire wrote The End of Power, and he talked about banking education, which is, let me just deposit this information in you. And so much of our educational system is just that. It's let me tell you what to think, what to know, what to believe. And so we put minds in these cages where they're told what to think and what to do. And I really would love to see a world someday where students are given the dignity and the respect to identify their own curiosities, their own learning journeys, and that education becomes about freeing and expanding minds rather than training and programming minds quite so much. I wanted to also comment that, so I've done a lot of world travel. I think it's 42 countries on 6 continents so far. I'd love to see as much of the world as I can. It's one of my favorite ways to learn. And I've seen the favelas, I've seen the townships, I've seen the homeless camps. There's a whole lot of poverty in the world. And I've come to the conclusion that the number one problem holding humanity back from progressing and from reaching its potential, and that which does more harm than we can possibly imagine, is poverty. When you exist and are born into and have to survive poverty, it's very difficult to step into your potential because you're just trying to survive. You can't really contribute to the world because you're just worried about your next meal or how you're going to get clean or where you're going to sleep tonight. And there are millions of people on our planet existing in that way. And so their potential just goes wasted. So poverty, we need to figure out how to eradicate poverty on planet Earth. So you have this Dignity Donut framework. Can you tell me a little bit more like how it works in practical application? You've mentioned, for example, that you've taken it into the schools. What kind of results have you seen when the Dignity Donut framework is applied in real life?
Yeah, as I say, we're at the beginning of this process in terms of the dignity agenda as such. Donna Hicks has, you know, seen results for this in schools, I think in prisons and other places. But our own experience with using the Dignity Donor platform, which has these other elements as well, has been, you know, very consistent. That, you know, Janine's been, you know, walking into these situations that have been created by the financialized compliance culture, where it's all very adversarial. The parents are under threat of fines or imprisonment for not sending their kids to school. The kids don't want to go to school. You know, the stories about children, you know, that the teachers saying, look, bring them to the school gate, bring them in their pajamas if you have to, and we'll, you know, physically take them into the school. You know, just horrible stories, and that's not that unusual. And bringing the dignity agenda into that makes it look very different. Suddenly you go, oh God, of course you can't do that. Of course you can't treat people like that. And by the way, what's this doing to the teacher? What pressures are on the teacher in order to, I mean, teachers don't sign up to treat kids like that. Not the typical teacher, not the average teacher, certainly. Headmasters, you know, don't, and headmistresses don't, you know, they're not there to do these things. It's the, you know, it's the compliance system. So it creates a new framework, and the results is very consistent. that people start to see things differently and behave differently as a result.
Yeah. So can you say a little bit too, Barry, like, let's just talk about dignity itself for a minute too, because this whole video is about the dignity donut. Why don't we give, why do you think we've fallen into this pattern of not giving dignity to other human beings?
I think there's two reasons. Yeah, I think there's two parts to it. One is I've mentioned already that we've ended up with this operating system, which was supposed to be scientific and efficient. That was the most important thing in the world. That's one of them. The other one is, and again, in the blueprint book, Nicholas Christakis does map this out and talk about this, and it's tribalism. And tribalism is, unfortunately, it's ever present in humanity.
I was about to say it's alive and well.
Yeah,
we love to in-group and out-group ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I won't but it comes naturally to us,
Yeah.
in
Fear,
so many different ways.
survival.
And I won't try and quote Christakis directly, but I'll paraphrase a little bit. But what he's saying is I think, right, that actually that doesn't play to our better selves, our rational selves, the selves that are able to understand and put ourselves in the mind, in the place of these other people. And the leaders that we admire are the people who are able to build bridges, the people who are able to to bring people together. There are people who admire the opposite, but they tend to be sociopaths. And we have to ask ourselves what kind of society we want to build and to live in, and where we're headed as a human race. We are de facto global now, so we kind of have to get over it.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you too is, like, imagine that humanity doesn't work on this, get it right. We just continue on the trajectory we're on now with divisiveness and tribalism and in-group and out-group and economic systems which heavily benefit a few at the cost of many being stuck in poverty. The maximization of profit with very little humanity and dignity mattering, just money mattering. If we don't figure out collectively how to create a society where everyone is given the dignity that they deserve for simply being human, what happens to our species? Like, if we don't figure this out and get it right, what happens? What's the picture?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this. And if you hear some people talk, it's quite literally the end of the world, and in a sense it is. But actually, do you know what? The planet will still be here. It won't be, how it should have been, but it will recover. It'll take, an era to recover. But what will happen is the breakdown of our civilization and our civilizations.
Scary.
And it's already beginning to happen. We're already beginning to see the wear and tear on the climate. So it's so clear now. We're seeing forced migration beginning already, and people in the future they're going to look back at us and go, "What the chuff were those people thinking? What were they doing? For 70 years? Why at the 60-year mark, the 70-year mark, could they not pull back?" And some of that damage is happening now. It's irreversible. There are signs that the economic system is pretty close to collapse, and no one can tell us whether it's not 30 years away. It's, you know, I doubt it's 10 years away. You know, people I respect talk about, you know, we maybe got 2, 3, 4 years to sort some of this stuff out before we reach tipping points that, you know, that we can no longer deal with.
Seems to me that a lot of what we're talking about sort of boils down to, on an individual level, like, do you as a person pick fear or love? Do you pick otherizing and knowing it all and dehumanization and fighting and all of that so I can be right and I can have my rightness and I can have what I want, I can, you know, stay rigid? Or do you pick the path of love? Do you offer understanding, compassion, empathy, dignity? Do you respect diversity and difference and embrace it, you know, in your individual life? And so there's the individual choice. So that's one part of it. It's like, as an individual actor in this global system, what sort of choices will you make? And will they be beautiful, moral, ethical choices or not? And on top of that, and beyond just individual, there's also just the system. The systems we have aren't working, and they need some, maybe they just need to be totally rebirthed. I don't know if they can be fixed, but I can see that incentives are given in our current system that that reward people for behaving in really selfish, stupid ways for the collective. And so we've got to figure out a way, and I don't have the answers. I can just see that there's a problem when our culture, our society, our systems, our governments, our economic systems, our educational systems, all the things we've co-created just are not working well in modern day, and they need to be rethought. What are your thoughts on that, Barry?
So I think what you've said is exactly right, that there are these two sort of yin and yang halves of this. And one is how I'm going to live my life, and and part of that is about the quality of my life and the lives of those around me and my relationships with other people. And when you neglect these things, in fact, people generally, once they understand dignity, they want to know how to protect themselves, but they also want to know how not to offend other people's dignity as well. So that's kind of one part of it. There's this kind of bridging piece in the middle of, I'll call it citizenship. We've forgotten how to be citizens, because you're right, there's, we are held in place, we are captive within a system running on those toxic economic doctrines, which make it very difficult to break through. So we've got thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of initiatives and organizations, and within big organizations, small organizations, and so on, trying to become more ecologically friendly, trying to fix these things, but all framed within a machine that's kind of moving us all in the same direction. So we need to find a way to break through on that, and it needs to be real and practical. We can't just wish it away. Some people are trying to fix economics and think that will fix the thing. It won't. Fixing economics right now will have no effect whatsoever at all. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. We'll need it in the future, but right now what we've got to fix is the operative economics, the operating system that still runs on those toxic ideas. So we've got to find ways to do that. So first of all, we're all citizens, and the more of us that get to understand this and care about this, that matters. And particularly, we've got to use the opportunities we've got. Some people say democracy is a shadow of its former self. Well, let's build it up. Let's use it. But also we've got to think about how we influence, the bigger picture, and that's kind of part of what Humane X is about. So it's one of the reasons why I'm so keen to work with you, Angela, and some of the other people, I guess, who are watching this, who have the capability to deal with those big picture issues, and realize that the people, whether it's at the World Bank or the G20 or you know, the Bank or these big global organizations, they're people like us, but they're trapped in this as well.
Yeah.
You know, they can't strafe off. If they want to keep their job, they can't strafe off from the pack. We've got to find a way to fix that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if an individual actor is very ethical and moral and wonderful if they're working in part of a system which is incentivizes certain behaviors which are counterproductive, or which, you know, the system is too large for one person to change. So clearly we need to do both. We need to be good individually, actors who choose the path of love as much as possible, being ethical, moral, good, offering dignity and respect to difference of people who are not the same as me, which is everybody, by the way. And we need to change our systems. We need to be individual and global citizens, not just national citizens, I would argue.
Find new ways to change those systems, to release decision makers from the kind of capture that they're in. You know, and we need change makers. We need change makers to come together.
You know what has occurred to me? I was watching a YouTube video a few months ago, and there was this guy, I don't even remember who it was, and he was basically describing the planet, like behind you, Barry, this visual of like, there's the Earth. And he basically said, this is an economic system. The planet is simply an economic system. And I felt sort of like, oh no, is that all we are? Is a system of exchange and barter, and what can I get from you that, and then I'll give you something for it? Or is that really what we are? And I asked myself this question: what is the global Earth system? Like, what sort of, if you had to pick one thing that the Earth is, and humans on the Earth are, and it occurred to me, and I could be wrong, this is just a proposal. It occurred to me, it's really an idea system, storytelling system. The reason we even have an economic system is because we first made up a story that we needed one. So even below the economic system is an idea system. We are mental creatures. Yes, we're physical creatures, but we're also mental creatures. We try to influence each other. We try to spread our thought viruses. We try to matter as much as we can because we really want that so much. And we're in this world where we're physical, but we're also very mental creatures. The digital world has made this even more so the case. So Earth is a system, an idea system. What do you think about that, Barry? Does that resonate?
I think you quite often hear people say, it's nothing butter. It's nothing butter. I call this nothing buttery. And it's a kind of intellectual arrogance that says, this is my story for this, and it's the only story.
There are many stories.
You and I both know that there are many perspectives, particularly on the world, on any situation, and you can't have a real understanding of the world from one viewpoint. The best you might have is a 2D picture. If you want a 3D picture, you've got to have 2 or 3 or 4 perspectives. And if you want a 4D picture over time, you've got to have time involved as well, and movement. And that means that, and we all know that there are many perspectives on just about everything. And you know what? This is true, that you've got a different perspective on something to me. What matters is the extent to which those things help me understand the reality. And so we need each other in this respect. Stories are incredibly important. I believe that the basis or very near the basis of intelligence. So, imagine, early in mankind's history, someone hears a twig snap in the middle distance, and painted in their mind is, what is that? This is the beginning of imagination. This was primal to keep us safe. So we make a story automatically, and the stories we now tell are much more elaborate and so on, and they interweave with one another. But there's a sense in which it is all that we have. All of the science is telling stories from different perspectives about the world, and some of them are really good at describing the universe, Einstein's theories, the micro world, quantum theory, and so on. But they're fundamentally stories, and stories are inextricably interlinked with mankind, as you say.
We've been trying to tell stories since we were cavemen. I mean, with drawings on walls, and we are creatures of story and of ideas, I think, and that's the basis of what we're here. And we need to tell some better stories and get some better ideas, because the ones we've been running off of aren't working too well.
Yeah, whenever you hear someone say it's nothing but then my antenna go up.
It's many things, yeah. So just in response to a few things you said, when we have different opinions, yes, it is difficult to navigate that. However, it's information. It can inform, those different perspectives can inform how we navigate, especially when it's something difficult. So it's helpful. Actually, we should embrace difference of opinions and use it to leverage that disagreement, hopefully not discord, but different perspectives to find solutions. And I really believe that we need creativity, innovation, and imagination to imagineer our future. The solution, we're not going to get the solution to our complex problems by using the same level of thinking that got us the problems. We need to make a quantum leap forward so that the solution is matched by the same sort of complexity of ideas. And that's part of why we need diverse humans to help us achieve better solutions.
We do need diversity. I draw a bit of a distinction between perspectives, which is, a lot about where I stand. I stand in a different place to you. I'm at a different point in my life, for example, or I live in a different country and I see different things as a result, and opinions. And there are some opinions that I roundly disagree with. There's a lot of different opinions around AI at the moment, for example, and some of the, some of the opinions of some of the players involved, I completely disagree with, but I respect that that's their opinion, and that they're entitled to that opinion, regardless. I may want to try and help them and present the evidence that shows, well, actually, that opinion doesn't work for some reason. But ultimately, we need to continue to be and learn more to be tolerant of other people's opinions. And part of the dignity framework that Donna Hicks talks about is the benefit of the doubt. It's part of the picture that we don't do what so often happens on the internet these days, so often happens in the toxic discourse, was we assume that the other person has a bad agenda, or is stupid, or isn't worthy in some way. That's a way, that's not a productive way on any plane at all.
Yeah. Barry, earlier in our conversation, you said something about democracy, and I just want to share. I went to Greece. I've probably said this on this channel before, but I went to Greece last year, where democracy was born. And a tour guide I was listening to in Athens said basically what democracy means is everyone matters. That's what democracy stands for. Now, democracy, I think, has been sort of I don't know, spoiled a bit. It's not perfect in the United States and in other democratic countries. Like clearly democracy run by imperfect humans is going to be imperfect. But the fundamental underpinning, the basic framework and belief of a democratic system is just everyone matters. And who could disagree with that? You know, what comes up for you when I say that democracy means everyone matters?
I think Winston Churchill, wasn't it, that said that uh, uh, democracy is the worst possible system except for all the others. Um,
He was
and
great.
I think what he meant by that is it's the best that we've got to do exactly what you say, that you know, to bring everyone in, to let everyone have a voice. I think that it's in its current incarnation is somewhat disabled. The fourth estate, the media, is not functioning as it needs to and should in a democracy, and that's been allowed to happen. We have you know, huge vested interests able to lobby in ways that are wrong because they're secret. It's not that the lobbying is the problem; it's the secrecy that's the problem, and the imbalance that's the problem. Which basically means that, you know, if I've got a lot of money, I can do a lot of lobbying and I can get my way. So that there's crucial problems, but some democracy, the democracy that we have, needs fixing, but it's better than the alternatives. But that doesn't mean we don't need to modernize democracy. We do. And actually, I don't know whether you won't have crossed over in Athens, I don't suppose, but John Alexander, who recently wrote the book Citizens, was in Athens as well for similar reasons, talking about democracy and talking about people's parliaments and so on. So there are potentially new and better forms of democracy, you know, being explored and becoming available. In Taiwan, you know, in particular, there's some really interesting things happened in Southern Ireland. There's some really interesting things happened over the you know, the abortion debate and so on there, where, you know, it was actually a people's parliament that made the decision and brought the irreconcilable sides together, in effect. So there are things that can move us in the right direction. We've been moving in the wrong direction for too long.
Yeah. You know, I think that the founders of democracy in Greece, I think when they first thought of how a democratic system would work, where everyone matters, intended for power to stop being so centralized in one or a few people. And they wanted power to be decentralized, you know, to empower the masses. That's the purpose of democracy. And in actual practice, in, you know, the early 21st century, I don't feel like power is decentralized much at all when it comes down to it. There's like major corporations and governments who have a whole lot of power, and the individual citizens and the people. Yeah, we have the internet that gives us a voice, gives us access to information and other people, but I'm not sure power is decentralized in the ways that it could and should be, as the founders and you know, the creators of democracy really had envisioned. So I think democracy has started, you know, it's spread throughout the world pretty well. And it is not a perfect system, but it's the best one we've got. But power and mattering need to be more decentralized even further, in my opinion.
Yeah,
My next question. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one small point on that, and it's that, you know, that there is such a thing as temptation, and, you know, one of the abiding temptations for people in power is to want to stay in power. Power corrupts. The more power, you know, absolute power, absolute corruption. there is that tendency, and it's hard to resist. And that's why you need democracy and democratic institutions, you know, and to balance those things as well. But sorry, you're going to move on.
So I just got a few more questions for you. So I had this realization recently as I was thinking about economics, and thanks to you, I think a lot more about economics now. I've never formally studied it. I have no degrees. I haven't worked in the field of economics, but I have been learning about it over time, slowly but surely. And I said that I wrote something on Facebook the other day, and I said something about economic violence. It came out of me, economic violence. And I asked myself, is that true? Can an economic system be violent against, can it be, I don't know if it's the right word, but you know what I'm saying? Can an economic system ruin lives?
And the answer is yes. Literally yesterday, on the news here was a story of I think he was a single parent, a father, who realized that because he couldn't afford to pay for the formula in the right quantities, he started watering it down. And this was beginning to cause problems. And he said to the interviewer that actually, if necessary, I'll steal it. Because actually, it's not really me who's in the wrong. It's actually the people who are charging, you know, the price of the product has doubled in a year. Wages have stagnated and so on, and wages have stagnated for years. So we've got a system where the sky's the limit for billionaires, for earnings and so on, but there's no floor. So that increasingly, I'll speak for the UK because I know it better than anywhere else, but increasingly people are being forced into poverty, and I define poverty as it's not having, you know, insufficient luxuries. It's not having your needs, and for me, there's a huge difference, you know, and not having a society that continues to be an unlevel playing field, pushing more and more wealth into the bank accounts and the asset troves of
the people who don't really need it more.
Yeah, who don't need it, who can't live long enough to spend it, or even leverage it, probably. But you know, that's fine so long as it's not at the expense of people being able to eat, to be housed, and so on. And that's a principle that's been ignored too long. It is one of the I'm not a Catholic. I'm not particularly an admirer of the Pope or the Catholic faith, but they do have a concept called the social mortgage, which says that if you're, you know, up there, if you're rich, you have a responsibility that goes with that to you know, to make sure that in your community people aren't going unheeded, that the sick are looked after, that there isn't that kind of abject poverty where people don't have the food they need, the clothes they need, the shelter they need. And we've kind of lost that, and we need to bring that. That's part of humanity as far as I'm concerned, and we need it back.
Yeah, you know, and I want to say, this is probably like a dumb question to ask, but I just want to cover all our bases. What do you, and you listed a few of them, you said food and housing, but Barry, what are the basic needs that you think every single human being on planet Earth should have met? Food, housing, what else?
Yeah, I mean, classically Maslow's hierarchy of need, you know, is our guide to this, but we all need food. we all need shelter, we all need clothes, and we all need the kind of the means to operate within society, to be able to earn a living, for example. So
Right to work.
these days, I would include the internet, or at least basic internet access. I would include electricity, or the means of heating and so on. Those and basic entertainment as well, to some extent. These then start to get into a kind of a grey area. But we haven't even got all those bases covered, all the basic bases, as it were covered already. And one of the things that we forget is that when we kind of talk about fairness and how people behave, you can't expect people to behave in the same way when they are literally, scrabbling around for the basics of life, just trying to survive, as when they've got they go to bed with a night with a full belly and the kids are okay and so on. Then you can have a civilized society. We're moving towards the place where we're putting so many people in so much poverty. We're asking for problems and we're asking for breakdown. I would support that, Father. Sometimes feeding your child and making sure that they survive is more important than breaking a rule. And actually, I'm supported in that through history by many moral philosophers as well.
What parent, if they had to choose between stealing food for their child or letting their child die, what parent wouldn't pick to commit a crime? We all would.
Unfortunately, it's not just a mental challenge and a conundrum, a question in a philosophy paper any longer. It's real. It's here now.
It's here now. Widespread poverty is coming, and it's only going to get worse. So, Barry, I also would like to add that I think education, healthcare, love and belonging, there are many basic human needs which everyone has a right. They should have met.
I agree.
And imagine what our world could look like if collectively we put our heads and our hearts together and figured out this puzzle. Like, how do we make sure that every human being on the planet has basic needs met? And it may not be a quick process. It may take decades to do. But I think if we bring our intelligence to bear, our capabilities, our morals, ethics, our imagination, that we can envision and create a world that would work for all of us instead of just some of us.
Yeah.
My last question, Barry, is just, what does dignity look like? Giving dignity, what does it really look like in practical application when you're interacting with another human being? What does it feel like? How can we know if we're giving dignity to someone else or not? What are the qualities of it?
That's a really good question. So the essence of dignity is my recognizing your humanity, is my recognizing the value of that. So that even if I disagree with you, even if we're in a conflict, I still respect that. So there are many different ways to be, and there are many. It's not a prescription as in that way. But when we offend someone's dignity, when we violate their dignity, if we can be bothered to be sensitive to that, we'll know that as well as them. So, and you know that from the way people behave. We'll know that in the workplace there are some bosses that that have no thought for the feelings, the dignity of the people that they work with. We'll know that, recently in the UK, there's been a big controversy around the Deputy Prime Minister who was removed eventually. And the report when it came out was very revealing. That this was someone who used the damage to people's dignity and their feelings, dressing them down in meetings and these sorts of things as a tool to get what he wanted, to accelerate a project or whatever. And he apparently, even to this day, feels he was unfairly removed. And that's what the opposite is. But we've all had a teacher or a boss or whoever who knew how to treat us, haven't we? Who valued us. And we know what that feels like.
Yeah. You know, I'm also not a religious person, but I was raised in the Christian faith, and a lot of its values stuck with me. Jesus was a really cool guy. And I think if I had to boil down what Jesus was trying to say and tell us, was the golden rule, like just treat people like you'd want to be treated, or now there's the platinum rule, treat them as if how they want to be treated, like figure that out and give them that. But I think dignity it feels like when I'm giving dignity to someone, it feels like you matter. I see you. I care. I want to understand you. Even if you're imperfect like me, dignity feels good to give, and it feels good to receive. Not being treated in a dignified way is a horrible experience for anybody. So, I mean, even if we all just tried to practice, let's end with this, Barry. What is like a practical suggestion or a recommendation or a challenge that viewers or listeners that we can leave them with, like maybe to practice giving and giving some dignity, and see how, like, what would you suggest to people to practice dignity?
Okay, good question. There are some obvious things. So, if this is something, I would recommend highly Donna Hicks's book. You'll find it if you Google dignity and Donna Hicks, Hicks. So have a look at that. If for no other reason, to learn how to protect your own dignity when it's under attack from other people, and not be vulnerable, which is something that matters pretty much to us all, I think. In terms of in practical ways, just think about the people around you, the people closest to you. Just think about, look through their eyes, and what they're like. What's their life like? I know what my life looks like, because I live it. But think a little bit more. Maybe think a little more deeply about your partner, your kids, your co-workers, and what does it look like to them? And I'm a believer in random acts of kindness as well, because that's something that often costs nothing at all or very little at all, and can put a smile on my face as well as yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's deciding to live your life according to the path of being loving instead of being fearful. And all of the domino effects that come from just choosing to be a really good person. And that includes living beyond your own perspective and learning, being part of a larger collective. And in order to be part of a larger collective in a smart way, you have to listen and understand and learn, especially from people who are different than you.
And my final comment or suggestion, if I may, is we need all the help we can get with this. We'd love to have people participate, but we need all the help we can get. So if this is resonating with you, as a viewer, come and join the Humane X network. HumaneX.network is how to find it, and keep in touch with what we're doing next. We need change makers, we hope, in the future to be able to help to train change makers and craft new strategies to release us from the toxicity and to release us from the problems we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm. Dignity, I think, feels like kindness in practical application. It feels like giving loving kindness, compassion, empathy, understanding, and recognizing that person matters. They matter. They're alive. They're sentient, conscious humans.
Yeah, I would draw a bit of a distinction, and I think it's an important one. So if round the table we've got people who have been at odds for years, and there's enmity because people from this family have killed people from this family or whatever, the sort of things Donna Hicks, you can't ask those people. It's too much to ask those people to be kind to one another.
That's a good point.
If that happens, and it does sometimes, once you unlock this, and there's some fantastic stories in the book about this as well, but you can say, look, you are a human being. We recognize your worth as a human being, and you should. It is an imperative. We can't ask you to be kind to this other person, but we can ask you to recognize their humanity. And yes, I'm a fan for kindness. Kindness is incredibly important, and that's how we should bring kids up, and that's we should have as much of that as possible. But we can't demand this of people. What we can demand is the recognition of the fairness, balance, and justice that I was talking about earlier on. They are critical demands of us all, and they are represented in the dignity and recognition of humanity that we were talking about.
I'm glad I said that thing about kindness. I'm glad you elaborated in a more nuanced way, because I think you're right. They are different. And part of what comes up for me now that we've been discussing this is that I think kindness is something you can offer to someone. Like if there's a spectrum of like, I really dislike you and I really love you. I think kindness is givable. If you're neutral to positive, you can easily, it's hard to give kindness when you don't like someone. It is so hard. But you can give dignity to people on that end of the spectrum. You can give dignity. You can acknowledge they also matter. It's not just me that matter. You can have an outward mindset, and you can have a considerate mindset, acknowledging the humanity and the importance of a life and their experience and their perspective. Even if you don't like them, even if you don't want to give them kindness, you can give them dignity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's a good challenge for you all. Try to give some dignity to someone you don't like. All right. On that note, Barry, is there any final thought you'd like to say before we end this discussion?
Thank you for the discussion. I appreciate that. Thank you for those listening. And again, if you want to be one of the change makers, get in touch. Ping me via the network, or if you just want to be, this resonates, you want to be part of it, come and find us. I'd love to meet some of you.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you very much and have a good day. Bye.
Thanks.